We want to get back now to runoff election results, taking a look at the very latest numbers in the race for a seat on the Public Service Commission. Incumbent Republican Chuck Eaton is facing Democratic challenger Lindy Miller. At this point, about 80% of precincts reporting Chuck Eaton in the lead with 54% to Miller's 46%.
And the race that most Georgians are watching tonight, the battle for Secretary of State. Brad Raffensperger, the former city council person in Johns Creek, a state rep from that area, has 55% to Democrat John Barrow's 45%. Barrow, of course, a former Georgia congressperson.
Well, something that's been interesting today is the turnout. It's been smaller today than it was in the general election, but there were still some issues at the polls. In Sandy Springs, election officials at the Life Center Church say access cards weren't delivered to them on time. Now, voters tell us they were offered provisional ballots while waiting on the supplies. A judge ordered that location stay open an hour later until 8 o'clock. And then on Atlanta's south side, the McGee Recreation Center opened late this morning, so it was also ordered to stay open late.
You know, voting problems and accusations of voter suppression were both huge issues in the governor's race. The Georgia Gang's Lori Geary joins us now to discuss all of this. I guess not a real surprise that Republicans have done well in the runoffs. That typically is the issue. But I'm stunned by the fact that a third as many people showed up last week and today as earlier last month.
Yeah, the Republicans are really good at getting their base out in the runoffs, as you mentioned, Russ. Even if you look back to 2008, it was Saxby Chambliss and Jim Martin. Saxby Chambliss took that race. And then even if you look back to 1992 with White Fowler and Paul Coverdale, it was Paul Coverdale. And it's looking like Republican turnout or voter turnout overall across the state for this runoff is about 20%.
And it was 61% on
it was. You're right. It's looking like a third.
Yeah, well, the Secretary of State position, especially important when you consider that we're still seeing issues at the polls in this runoff election. We just did this a few weeks ago.
We did, and you would think that the Democratic turnout would be a lot higher than it is because of those issues, those accusations about voter suppression. I mean, you're talking about the state election chief officer here, and with all of those accusations, and Stacey Abrams coming out to really hope that John Barrow would claim victory here. It just didn't happen. And there really, again, is not a lot of surprises because of the Republican turnout. The Republican, Brad Raffensperger, ran kind of a low-key campaign. He didn't raise nearly as much money as John Barrow did as the congressman, but it looks like that money was not an issue in this race because that was the same way also in the Public Service Commission race.
All right, let's talk about the Georgia House District 28. I mean, you think your vote doesn't count? Ladies and gentlemen, wow. It does. Maybe we can put that up on the screen. Chris Irwin and Dan Gassaway, about 7,000 votes cast, 3 between.
I actually had to take a double take on these numbers. If you looked at them, it was 3,516 for Chris Irwin over Dan Gassaway with 3,513. So if you think those absentee ballots will be counted and then recounted, you know, they can be counted. They can be postmarked by today, and then they can be counted up until Friday. So that really, those absentee ballots could really make the difference in this race.
Absolutely.
Very interesting numbers.
Is there a precedent for this, or could this come down to 3 votes making the difference?
It really could, but I haven't seen a race this close in so long. But I really think the absentee ballots in this case will make the difference.
Right. Lori Geary, thanks very much.
Sure.
Brad Raffensperger has declared victory in the Secretary of State's race. Let's listen to what he had to say just moments ago.
And I just want every Georgian to know that I'm going to be fighting for them. I want to make sure that elections are clean, fair, and accurate. And that's the #1 priority as your next Secretary of State. I'm very humbled, I'm very honored to have won this race tonight. We couldn't have done it without y'all. We couldn't have done it without the blessing of the Lord. Amen. Thank you very much. Amen. God bless.
Raffensperger, the Secretary of State elect now for the state of Georgia.